On June 25th, 1947, in Cleveland, Ohio, there was a welterweight title boxing match between Jimmy Doyle and Sugar Ray Robinson that ended in a technical knockout and sadly ended up with Jimmy Doyle passing away. Here's the story behind this tragic event in sports today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a rapid deep dive into sports history every day. And today's trivia question is, how much money did Sugar Ray Robinson donate to Jimmy Doyle's mother? Now, boxing is one of the most dangerous sports out there. It's literally fighting. It's a sport where your goal is to beat up your opponent. And tragically, sometimes that ends in death. And since they started keeping track of this back in the late 1800s, there have been over 500 boxers to die in the professional boxing ring. And you may think, yes, it was back in the day, but it's gotten safer in recent years with the more focus on safety in all of sports. But despite that, there's still been 2 professional deaths in the year 2024. So despite the advancements we have, boxing is not inherently safe. That doesn't mean it can't be done safe, but the rules have to be followed, and we have to continue to monitor these fighters and make decisions for them. But that's not something they focused on in the 1940s, as there was over 12 professional boxing deaths related to injuries from the ring. And most notably of all of these was when Jimmy Doyle took on Sugar Ray Robinson for the welterweight title in Cleveland, Ohio. And sadly, this is one of those events that if today may have not happened and may have saved his life. See, back in the 1940s, boxers weren't given adequate time to recover from fights. This was Jimmy Doyle's 5th fight in 1947, and it was only June. He fought in January, February, March, May, and June, all in 1947. But he had a reason. He was having success in the ring. With a record of 43 wins, 7 losses, and 3 draws, he was a successful fighter. And he began fighting in 1941 and had success immediately. And continued to have success. As entering the fight versus Sugar Ray, he was 43-6-3. And obviously, this was for the welterweight title, even though he was only 22 years old. The problem was, though, almost a year earlier, he had a fight also in Cleveland, and he lost to Artie Levine. And the problem was that he also had to be taken to the hospital after this due to a severe head injury after the 8th round. And doctors told him he had a severe concussion and brain damage and should never fight again. And even his family noticed that he was more lethargic and didn't even want to be active. But the problem was he didn't have any other skills. Boxing was all he knew. So just 9 months later, he jumped back into the ring, fighting 5 more fights to lead up to a welterweight title bout versus the best fighter in the 1940s, Sugar Ray Robinson. And Sugar Ray Robinson deserves his own entire episode, but just a brief history. He began boxing in 1940, and he went on a winning streak starting in 1941, winning over 90 matches in a row. Going into the 1950s, he could not be beat in the 40s, despite a one blip where he lost by a controversial decision. But leading up to this fight with Jimmy Doyle, he didn't know that a year earlier that Jimmy had this previous head injury. He mainly just knew that a few days before the fight, he had a dream where he woke up yelling, "Get up, Jimmy, get up." And it was so vivid that he woke himself up. And it made him nervous, and he even went to go speak to a priest after this as he was so worried about this fight. And everyone assured him it was just a dream. But sadly, that dream came true. On June 25th, 1947, the fight began against Jimmy Doyle and Sugar Ray for the world welterweight title. And Robinson really came out dominating and had the advantage in every round except for the 6th round, where Jimmy was able to get him with some jabs and even got him a cut over his eye. But in the 8th round, Doyle attempted a right hook as Robinson was doing the same, as Robinson was sending a left hook, and it struck Doyle on the head as he fell onto his back hard. The referee started to count,
Doyle raised himself on his elbows and tried to use the ropes to get back on his feet, but couldn't find his footing again. The bell ended the round as the referee got to the ninth count of his 10 count. So Doyle was saved from a knockout, but his handlers ended the match. And Doyle was quickly taken to St. Vincent's Charity Hospital in Cleveland as he was unconscious and died a few hours later with family and even Robinson at the hospital. And after the fight, local authorities threatened to bring criminal charges against Robinson of charges that included manslaughter, but luckily those never came to be because he was just in a fight. And the reason why Doyle passed away was due to previous injuries. He had actually been knocked out so hard in California that the California State Boxing Commission would not sanction him to fight again, which is why most of his fights towards the end of his career, even though he was only 22, were held in Cleveland and on the East Coast, even though he was known as a West Coast fighter. But Robinson felt so much guilt about this fight. He had that dream. He saw, even though it wasn't his fault, there was a lot of guilt. And he actually donated the earnings from his next 4 fights to Doyle's mother, as Doyle was fighting to buy his mom a house. And with those next 4 earnings, Robinson was able to buy that house for Doyle's mother. Now, over the years, boxing commissions have gotten better at sanctioning and not sanctioning fighters, as there's more communication between states. And so if you are not sanctioned in one state, the likelihood to be not sanctioned in another is very high. But in the 1940s, communication like that wasn't done as well as it is today. And despite this emotional challenge for Robinson to deal with what he caused Doyle, he continued to have a great career, arguably the best non-heavyweight fighter there ever was, finishing it with a career of 174 wins, 19 losses, and 6 draws. And he broke grounds as being one of the first African Americans to establish himself as a star even outside of the sport. This is a sad moment, and it shows you how violent boxing can be. It is so sad that this had to happen, because it could have been preventable. In today's boxing world, probably would have, as Jimmy Doyle probably wouldn't have been allowed to fight. But the 1940s was a different world, a different era, and sadly it led to the death of a young fighter. But we can always remember him as he was fighting for not only himself, but his family, because it's all he knew how to do. And if you like this story, please let us know. Leave us a review wherever you're listening. We'd love to know how you're enjoying the show and if there's any topics you want us to cover. And come back tomorrow for more daily sports history. And did you catch the answer to today's trivia question?
How much money did Sugar Ray Robinson donate to Jimmy Doyle's mother? He gave her his earnings for the next 4 fights, which was enough for her to buy the house that Jimmy had picked out for her.